Claire Thompson sat in a hotel room, her gaze fixed on the laptop screen. If you looked at the location on a map of the United States, it was a nondescript point somewhere on I-80 between Des Moines and Omaha. Outside, the late April dusk was thickening, and in her chest grew a vague unease that hadn't left her for the past few weeks. She had arrived 3 days earlier on company business negotiations with a major supplier, signing contracts, inspecting warehouses. It was just another work trip, one of many she had taken in the last year. David, her husband, always accepted these trips with a calm demeanor. Too calm if she thought about it. Maybe I'm going crazy, Claire thought as she opened the app to access her home security camera. She had installed it a week before leaving. Something had told her she needed to. A woman's intuition, perhaps. She had orchids on the kitchen windowsill, fussy flowers that required attention. David had promised to water them every 3 days, but Claire knew perfectly well he wouldn't give them a second thought. But it wasn't really about the orchids. In recent months, something had changed. David had become distant. He was always staying late at work, and his architecture firm wasn't going through its best period. He now carried his phone everywhere, even into the bathroom. And 2 months ago, Claire had accidentally seen a message on his screen. "Waiting for you," like always. The sender was saved simply as M. When she asked who it was, David had replied dismissively, "Mandy, the new accountant." He smiled as if that explained everything. Claire didn't make a scene. She had never liked drama. Instead, she began to watch. And the more she watched, the more her certainty grew. David was having an affair. All the signs were there. So, a camera in the kitchen seemed like a logical step. The kitchen was the heart of their condo, the place where they always talked at night. If David brought someone home, they would end up there. It was now around 8 p.m. Claire opened the app and activated the live feed. The screen was black for a few seconds, then the image appeared. The kitchen, the same round table where she and David had eaten breakfast for the past 5 years. The warm light from the lamp, and 3 people sitting around it. Claire froze. David was at the table. Beside him, a woman in her late 20s with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her features were painfully familiar. It was Sarah, not some accountant from the firm, but Claire's younger sister. Across from them sat a man in a light-colored shirt and glasses, with a folder of documents in front of him, a stranger. Claire turned up the volume. "The important thing is that everything is filed before she gets back," the stranger was saying. His voice was low, slightly nervous. "I've already made the changes to the company bylaws, as you requested. Now all liability for the debts falls on the CEO, that is, on her." "Perfect," David sounded pleased. "So when Claire gets back, we'll already be out of the country, and she'll have to deal with the creditors." Sarah laughed. It was a laugh Claire remembered from childhood, clear, carefree, but now there was something cruel in it. "Honestly, I thought she'd figure it out sooner," Sarah said, pouring herself some wine. "But no, my big sister is too trusting. Always has been." "Trust is a good thing," David commented, clinking his glass against hers. "At least for us." Mr. Miller, the lawyer, as Claire now understood, nervously adjusted his glasses. His face showed concern. "Look," he began, "I'm still an officer of the court. This maneuver is skating on the edge of the law. If something goes wrong, they could implicate me as an accomplice. I don't want to be dragged any further into this." "Relax, Mr. Miller," David said, patting his shoulder. "Everything's been thought through. The documents are clean. We got Claire's signatures a while back, when she signed that batch of papers for the bank, remember? 6 months ago. The authorizations we needed were mixed in with them. She didn't even read what she was signing." A chill ran down Claire's spine. 6 months ago, David had indeed brought her a pile of documents, claiming they were to renew a line of credit. She had signed, trusting him. How could she have been so blind? "Even so," the lawyer insisted, "this is fraud. If she goes to the police—" "She won't," Sarah assured him. "My sister isn't the type to press charges. She'll try to handle it quietly on her own to avoid embarrassing the family. And by the time she figures out what to do, we'll be long gone." "And where are you planning to go?" Mr. Miller asked. "The Cayman Islands," David replied. "Everything's already set up there. A condo bought in the company's name, bank accounts opened. Sarah and I fly out in a week. By then, the company's debts will have officially transferred to Claire. The creditors will start demanding money, and there will be nothing to pay them with. The business is practically bankrupt. We transferred the assets a while ago. Claire listened, unable to believe it. Her company, the construction firm she had built over 10 years, pouring all her energy and money into it. David was a partner only on paper. He always said he didn't get involved in management. "Architecture is my thing, the company is yours," he would repeat. And now it turned out he had been destroying it from within, transferring assets to shell corporations and taking out loans in her name. And Sarah, her little sister whom she had always protected, whom she helped financially, for whom she'd found a job, Sarah had always been envious of her. Claire knew it. Envious of her success, her husband, her condo. But to this extent? "Mr. Miller, are you absolutely sure the plan will work?" Sarah asked again. There was a slight doubt in her voice. The lawyer took a few seconds to answer. Claire watched his face intently. He was uneasy, even scared. His hands trembled as he shuffled the papers. "Legally, everything's been reviewed," he said finally. "But I repeat, I am an attorney. I don't want to be involved more than necessary. The documents are ready, the maneuver. But if an investigation starts—" "It won't," David interrupted him. "Claire is too proud to admit her husband and sister betrayed her. She'll keep quiet and try to get through it alone. And by the time she realizes it's impossible, we'll be out of her reach." The lawyer nodded, but Claire could see he wasn't convinced. His fingers drummed on the table, his eyes darting back and forth. This man feared the consequences. He clearly feared being used. "All right," Mr. Miller said, gathering his papers. "I've done my part. The rest is up to you. And I repeat, do not involve me any further." Of course," David said. "You can go, Mr. Miller. Thanks for everything." The lawyer stood up, took his briefcase, and headed for the door. At the threshold, he stopped. "I hope you know what you're doing." When the door closed, Sarah scoffed. "Coward. He drafted half the plan himself, and now he's scared." "But he's a professional," David replied. "Without him, we couldn't have pulled it off so cleanly." Claire muted the sound and stared at the wall. Her hands were shaking, her throat was dry. She felt a mix of rage, pain, and a strange cold serenity. Tears threatened to fall, but she wouldn't let them. No, she had to think now. David and Sarah had betrayed her. That was clear. They planned to destroy her life, leave her with the debt, and run off together. Which meant there was more between them than just a business arrangement. Claire remembered glances, casual touches at family dinners. She had interpreted them as simple affection. How blind she had been. But the lawyer, Mr. Miller. He was afraid. He repeated several times, "I'm an attorney. Don't involve me." He wasn't sure of what he was doing. He even seemed to regret his part in the scheme. Claire replayed the clip. Yes, he was nervous. His anxiety was real. In contrast, David and Sarah seemed euphoric, completely confident. They were sure of success. The lawyer was not. If he's scared, he can be reasoned with, Claire thought. She got up and walked to the window. Below, the lights of a small Midwestern city twinkled. Just yesterday, her life had seemed stable, predictable. A thriving business, a reliable husband, a family. And today, it had all crumbled. But Claire wasn't going to give up. She never gave up. A plan began to form in her mind. First, save the recording. Second, find out everything about that lawyer, who he is, where he works, his role in the plan. Third, find a way to contact him. If he was scared, she could either persuade him or scare him even more. She returned to the laptop and saved the recording to the cloud in a password-protected account. Then she opened a search engine and began to investigate. Stephen Cole, attorney, Chicago. The results appeared. Stephen Cole, Granite Legal Group, specializing in corporate law. Phone number, office address. A photo on his website, the same man with glasses, but smiling. A professional smile with no life behind it. Claire wrote down all the details in a notebook. The next morning, she would return to Chicago without telling David. Officially, her business trip was supposed to last another week, but she would make up an excuse. She would tell her colleagues she was needed urgently at home, and she wouldn't tell David anything at all. She looked at the screen again. David and Sarah were still in the kitchen, drinking wine, laughing. They were talking about the future, about their life in the Cayman Islands, about days on the beach, about freedom. Claire listened to them and felt an icy determination grow inside her. "You think you've won," she said to them in silence, "but the game has only just begun." She closed the laptop and started packing her suitcase. She had an early flight. She had to be on time. She had to move quickly and cautiously. David and Sarah must not suspect anything until the very last moment. And the lawyer, she would talk to him soon. Very soon. She got into bed. In her mind, the scenes from the kitchen replayed, the words of David and Sarah, Stephen's anxious face. "I'm an attorney. Don't involve me." That phrase sounded like a plea or a warning. Stephen feared not only the consequences but also being made the scapegoat. He had a survival instinct. Claire planned to use that. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Tomorrow, a new chapter in her life would begin. A chapter in which she would not be the victim, but the player. And she intended to win. Claire returned to Chicago the next morning, very early. The plane landed at O'Hare at 6:30 a.m., and she took a cab immediately, but not to her home. She went to a friend's rented apartment in Logan Square. Elena was on vacation in Turkey and had left Claire the keys, asking her to water the ficus. Now, that apartment had become the perfect hideout. Claire went up to the 5th floor, opened the door, and went inside. A small studio with a view of a noisy avenue. It smelled of stale air and something floral. She opened the window, dropped her bag on the sofa, and took out her laptop. There was no time to lose. David and Sarah were planning to fly out in a week. That meant she had exactly 7 days to turn their plan on its head. The first thing she did was watch the camera recording again, taking detailed notes. Stephen Cole, attorney at Granite Legal Group. Specialization: corporate law, M&A support, corporate restructuring. The firm's website had little information. A degree from Northwestern Pritzker School of Law, 10 years of practice. No personal details. Claire checked social media. Cole's LinkedIn profile was partially private, but she could see a few things. A couple of photos at legal conferences, another at a book fair. By all appearances, a discreet, modest man. Few connections, marital status not listed. She called Catherine Miller, an old acquaintance who worked as in-house counsel for a large corporation. "Claire." "Hi," Catherine said, surprised to hear from her. "Aren't you supposed to be on a trip?" "I came back early," Claire replied curtly. "Listen, I need some information. Have you heard anything about Granite Legal Group or a lawyer named Stephen Cole?" Catherine was silent for a moment, thinking. Granite Legal. "Yeah, sounds familiar. A mid-tier firm. They do corporate law. Their reputation seems okay, but there are whispers they sometimes operate in the gray area. Cole, I think, is their restructuring specialist. Supposedly competent, but very quiet. Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Claire said evasively. "Do you think he could be involved in something shady?" "Who isn't these days?" Catherine laughed. "But seriously, I've never heard anything bad about him. Though in our field, everyone knows everyone, and almost nothing is known about him. He's either very clean or very careful." "I see. Thanks, Catherine." Claire hung up and thought. Careful. That fit with what she had seen in the recording. Cole hadn't initiated the plan. That was obvious. Most likely, David and Sarah had dragged him in, promising good money or pressuring him in some other way. Now he was afraid of the consequences. For the next 2 days, Claire studied all the available material. Through contacts, she requested copies of her company's documents filed with the IRS. She discovered several suspicious transactions made 6 months ago. Large loans, transfers to accounts of shell corporations. The signatures were hers, but she didn't remember those documents. It meant David was telling the truth. Among the papers she had signed were fictitious contracts. Waves of rage washed over her, but Claire suppressed them. Emotions were the enemy now. She needed a clear head. On the third day, she decided to act. The plan was ready. She had to meet the lawyer in person, but in a way that seemed like a chance encounter. She couldn't let him suspect she knew about the conspiracy. First, she had to lower his guard, then strike. Through Catherine, she found out where Cole usually had lunch. It turned out he went to a small cafe near the Granite Legal Office in Wicker Park almost every day. The cafe was called The Provincial and specialized in light salads and coffee, a quiet, not too crowded place. On Thursday, at exactly 1 p.m., Claire walked into The Provincial. The cafe was cozy, with wooden tables and the smell of fresh pastries. Claire glanced around and saw him almost immediately. Stephen Cole was sitting by the window. In front of him was a cappuccino and a Caesar salad. He was reading something on a tablet, occasionally making notes with a stylus. Claire ordered a coffee and sat at a table across from him, slightly out of his direct line of sight, so she could watch him without drawing attention. She took out her phone and pretended to check her emails. In reality, she was observing him. Cole looked tired. He ate slowly, without appetite, constantly distracted by the tablet. Claire noticed his hand tremble several times as he lifted the cup to his lips. He was nervous. Good. She waited about 10 more minutes, then stood up and headed for the exit. As she passed his table, she deliberately brushed against his briefcase. It fell to the floor. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Claire said, bending down. She picked up the briefcase and handed it to him. "I'm so clumsy today." "It's nothing," Cole said, taking the briefcase and glancing at her, an indifferent, fleeting look. "Are you sure everything is okay?" Claire smiled apologetically. "Yes, it's fine," he nodded. "Don't worry about it." Claire was about to leave. But then, as if suddenly remembering, she stopped. "Excuse me, you look so familiar. Do you work at a law firm?" Cole tensed. His eyes narrowed. "I do. It's just that I'm in a complicated situation right now," Claire said, sitting in the chair opposite him without waiting for an invitation. "I need advice from a corporate lawyer. And you look a lot like the attorney I've been emailing with, though I might be mistaken." "It's possible." Cole clearly wanted to end the conversation, "but I'm busy right now." "I understand," Claire nodded. "It's just an urgent matter. I have a feeling my business partner is trying to divert the company's assets and leave me with all the debt. I was told you specialize in these kinds of things." At the words "divert the company's assets," Cole's face twitched. He pushed his plate aside and looked at her more closely. "Who told you about me?" "A mutual acquaintance, an attorney," Claire lied. "She said you can help in complicated situations." Cole was silent. Claire could see him calculating whether it was worth continuing the conversation. "All right," he said at last. "Tell me briefly." Claire began to tell an invented story about a partner who was supposedly trying to cheat her using forged documents. She spoke in general terms, but every detail closely resembled what was actually happening to her. Cole listened, and the more Claire spoke, the paler his face became. "And now I don't know what to do," Claire concluded. "I'm scared to think that the lawyer who helped prepare the documents might also be involved, though maybe he just didn't realize what he was doing." "Didn't realize?" Cole let out a bitter smile. "Lawyers always know what they're doing. The question is to what extent they're willing to take responsibility." "And are you willing?" Claire asked, looking him directly in the eyes. He flinched. "What are you talking about?" Claire took out her phone and opened the camera app. She found the saved recording and placed the phone on the table, screen up. The frozen image showed her kitchen, the table, 3 people sitting. Cole looked at the screen and went white. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. "I believe we've already met, Stephen," Claire said in a low voice. "You helped my husband, David Thompson, and my sister Sarah prepare the documents to saddle me with the company's debts. And now you're worried they'll make you the scapegoat." Cole sat paralyzed for a few seconds. He just stared at the screen, then looked up at Claire. There was shock and fear in his eyes. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I'm Claire Thompson, the very woman the 3 of you decided to deceive and destroy." Cole shot up in his chair as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown on him. "Oh my God, calm down. I'm not calling the police right now," Claire said, putting her phone away. "First, I want to talk to you." "About what?" His voice trembled. "Because you're scared," Claire replied. I can see it. You repeated several times that you don't want to be involved. That means you understand what you've gotten yourself into, and I'd bet you're regretting ever agreeing to it. Cole was silent. His hands gripped the edge of the briefcase tightly. What do you want from me? He finally asked. The truth. Claire leaned forward. All of it. How they dragged you into this, what exactly you did, what documents you prepared, where the money went. And then, I want you to help me turn their plan around and use it against them. You're crazy. Cole shook his head. I can't. That would violate attorney-client privilege. I'd be disbarred. And if I go to the U.S. attorney with this recording, you'll be jailed for fraud, Claire countered calmly. Privilege doesn't cover criminal acts. So, you have a choice. Help me and stay free, or refuse and go down with them. Cole put a hand to his forehead. Claire saw it was shaking. Several long minutes passed before he spoke. They came to see me 2 months ago. His voice was dull. David Thompson said he needed help restructuring his wife's company. He offered me good money. I agreed, thinking it was a standard job. But then it turned out he wanted to divert the assets and leave her with the debt. I told him it was illegal, but he insisted. He said I had no choice, that I'd already signed several documents and was already an accomplice. And you agreed, Claire tried to speak calmly. I got scared, Cole admitted. I needed the money. I had debts, problems. I thought no one would find out. But when I saw how they were planning everything, I realized they were using me. If anything went wrong, I'd be the one to blame. The lawyer who processed the paperwork. You're right, Claire nodded. That's exactly what will happen if you don't help me. Cole looked up at her. And if I help you? If you help me, I will do everything possible to ensure the blame falls on David and Sarah. You will be the witness who cooperated to uncover the crime. You might even get a reduced sentence or probation. But most importantly, you won't be made the primary culprit. He was silent, thinking. Claire could see a fierce internal battle waging in his mind, fear of consequences, the desire to save himself, remnants of professional ethics, all mixed together. I need to think about it, he said at last. You have one day. Claire stood up. Tomorrow, same time, same place, you will give me your decision. If you refuse, I go to the police with the recording. If you agree, we start to act. And Stephen, she leaned toward him, lowering her voice, don't even think about warning David or Sarah. I'm watching you. If you call them, I'll know. And then I'll go straight to the district attorney. Is that clear? Cole nodded without looking up. Claire left the cafe. Only when she was on the street did she allow herself to exhale. The tension was taking its toll. Her head was spinning. She walked several blocks, then stopped in front of a shop window, pretending to look at the merchandise. In reality, she was checking if Cole was following her, but he was nowhere in sight. She hailed a cab and asked to be taken to Elena's apartment. As she rode, the next step of the plan was forming in her head. If Cole agreed, she would have access to all the documents, all the schemes they had designed. She could find out where the money went, how to void the transactions, how to prove David and Sarah's guilt, and if he refused, she would have to act differently. But Claire was almost certain he would agree. Fear is a powerful motivator, and Stephen Cole was very, very afraid. That night, she connected to the kitchen camera again. David was home alone, making dinner. He seemed relaxed, even humming something. Claire watched him, and her heart felt like it was turning to ice. The man she had lived with for 5 years, the man she had loved, was capable of such a betrayal. And Sarah, her own sister. She closed the laptop and lay down on the sofa. Tomorrow, there would be another meeting with Cole. Claire hoped he would make the right decision. Because if he didn't, she would have to find another way. But giving up? Never. The next day, Claire arrived at the Provincial at exactly 1 p.m. Cole was already sitting at the same table by the window. An untouched cup of coffee sat in front of him. He looked even worse than the day before, ashen face, bloodshot eyes, unshaven. He clearly hadn't slept all night. Claire sat across from him. For a few seconds they were silent, studying each other. "I'll do it," Cole said in a low voice. "I'll help you. But on one condition." "Which is?" "You guarantee you'll be on my side. I will testify, I will hand over all the documents, but you will ask for a plea deal for me with the prosecutor. Probation, in the worst-case scenario. But no jail time. Claire nodded. Agreed. But only if you do everything I say. No deviations, no trying to deceive me. I understand. Cole shook his head. God, what have I gotten myself into? Tell me everything. From the beginning. Claire took out a notebook. How exactly does the plan work? Every detail. Cole took a deep breath and began to speak. Claire listened and took notes. The picture that emerged was grim. It all started 3 months ago. David, using a power of attorney from Claire, showed up at Granite Legal Group, requesting a restructuring of his wife's company. In the first few meetings, David acted professionally. He explained that his wife was too busy with day-to-day management and had entrusted him with legal matters. Cole suspected nothing. He started working, studying the company's structure, analyzing assets and liabilities. Then, at the third meeting, Sarah appeared. David introduced her as the company's financial advisor. Together, they laid out the real plan, to move all valuable assets through a chain of shell companies and leave the debts in Claire's name. By then, Cole was already deeply involved in the work, had signed a non-disclosure agreement, and had received the first payment. They told me that if I refused, they would sue me for disclosing trade secrets, Cole explained, and that I was already an accomplice, because I had signed several intermediate documents. I got scared. And then there was the money. They promised me $200,000 for the whole job. I have a mortgage, debts to friends. I agreed. And what did you do next? Claire asked, containing her rage. I made changes to the company's articles of incorporation. I used the signatures David had brought on separate documents. He told me you had signed them 6 months ago. Technically, everything looked legal. The CEO you signed off on changes that made you personally liable for all the company's financial obligations. It's a rare practice, but permissible, usually used in family businesses. And then we processed several fictitious loans. Your company supposedly received credit from other legal entities, but they were actually shell companies registered to figureheads. The money was transferred to the accounts of these companies and from there withdrawn as cash or sent abroad. In the end, a debt of about $15 million was formed. Claire was in shock. $15 million? And the company's assets? Where did they end up? The equipment, real estate, vehicles all sold at far below market value to those same shell companies. Then they were resold at their real price, and the difference went into David and Sarah's accounts. Formally, a company in the Cayman Islands, registered to a frontman, became the owner of everything. But they have the real control. And when do they plan to leave? The day after tomorrow, Saturday. They've already bought the tickets. As soon as they're in the Caymans, the bankruptcy process for your company will begin. Creditors will sue, and you will be the one to answer for it, according to the new bylaws. Claire wrote down the last sentence and put her pen down. Okay, now tell me, can these changes to the bylaws be reversed? In theory, yes. Cole hesitated. If it's proven that the signatures were obtained through deceit, but it's a long process, through the courts. While the lawsuit progresses, creditors could still execute the debt against you. What if we act faster? Claire leaned forward. What if we make new changes to the bylaws right now that nullify the previous ones? That would require a decision from the CEO and the agreement of all partners, Cole said thoughtfully. The partners are you and David, 50-50. He won't agree. And what if we prepare the documents in a way that his consent isn't necessary? Cole frowned. It's complicated. You need grounds. For example, if one of the partners is legally incompetent or a fugitive. Wait. What if we argue that David acted in his own self-interest, causing harm to the company? Then we could go through the courts. No, Claire interrupted. A judge will take too long. I have to act now. They spent another hour discussing options. They found some legal loopholes. Slowly, a plan began to take shape. Cole would prepare a new set of documents that would annul the changes to the bylaws and return financial responsibility to the partners. At the same time, he would file a record stating that all loans were fictitious and that the asset sales were void due to a conflict of interest. But all of this requires signatures and corporate seals, Cole warned. "Without them, the documents are invalid." "The company seal is at my house," Claire said. "And the signatures. I'm the CEO. My signature is sufficient for many decisions." "Not for all of them," Cole countered. "To void some transactions, you need David's signature." Claire was pensive. "What if we do this? We prepare documents where I act on behalf of the company, defending its interests. And David is assigned the status of a defendant in a fraud case. In that scenario, his signature wouldn't be needed. But for that, we need to initiate criminal proceedings." Cole shook his head. "And that again involves the authorities." "Then that's how we'll work," Claire said firmly. "But not yet. First, we'll prepare everything necessary. Documents, evidence, diagrams of the money trail. And then, when we have everything ready, we'll strike all at once. I will file the complaint with the U.S. attorney. You will hand over the documents as a witness, and we will block their departure from the country." Cole was silent, thinking. "It could work," he said finally, "but it takes time. At least 3 days." "We have 2 until they leave," Claire reminded him. "So we work non-stop." They agreed to meet in the evening at Cole's office. Claire left, and the lawyer remained in the cafe, finishing his now cold coffee. She had seen fear in his eyes, but also a certain relief. It seemed he genuinely wanted to get out of this mess without ending up in prison. Claire returned to Elena's apartment and began her own preparations. First, she reviewed all the electronic company documents she had. She found copies of the loans, contracts for asset sales. Everything looked legal, but now Claire understood that behind every paper was a deception. Then she called the bank where the company had its accounts. "Good morning, this is Claire Thompson, CEO of Keystone Construction, LLC. I need a statement of all transactions for the last 6 months." "1 moment," the bank employee replied. "We can email the statement to you within 24 hours. Would it be possible to get it urgently? It's important for an audit." "We'll send it this afternoon." Claire thanked him and hung up. By evening, she would have the complete map of the money trail. That would be an essential piece of evidence. At 6 p.m., she arrived at Cole's office. Granite Legal Group was located on the 3rd floor of a business center on a commercial street in Wicker Park. Claire went up, introduced herself to the security guard as Cole's client. She was led to a small office at the end of the hall. Cole was sitting behind a desk covered in papers. He looked exhausted but focused. "I've already started working," he said as Claire entered. "I've prepared drafts of the documents. Look." He spread several sheets in front of her. Claire read carefully. Cole had drafted minutes for an emergency partners meeting where the bylaw changes were annulled. Then, a detailed complaint addressed to the U.S. Attorney for Fraud, with all the facts and documents listed. After that, a request for a freeze on David and Sarah's assets. "This is a good start," Claire said. "But we need something more. Proof that they plan to leave the country. Tickets, correspondence." "I have the correspondence." Cole opened his laptop. "David sent me emails with instructions. I saved everything, just in case." "Perfect!" Claire was pleasantly surprised. "So you didn't trust them from the beginning?" "I don't really trust anyone," Cole replied bitterly. "That's why I save everything." They worked until midnight. Cole drafted the documents, Claire corrected, checked the data. They prepared a complete package: complaints, minutes, requests, evidence. "Now for the most important part," Claire said. "You have to continue acting as usual. David and Sarah must not suspect anything. If they ask if everything is ready, you tell them yes. If they call you to a meeting, you go. Pretend everything is going according to plan." "What if they want to see me before they leave?" Cole asked. "Go see them," Claire replied. "Tell them everything is processed, that the documents are valid, that they can travel without worry. Let them relax. The more confident they are, the easier it will be to catch them." Cole nodded. "And what will you do? Go back home?" Claire stood up. "David thinks I'm still on a business trip. Tomorrow afternoon, I'll show up as a surprise. I'll say I came back early. I'll act as usual, tired, but in a good mood. Not a word that I know everything." She extended her hand. "Thank you. You're making the right decision." Cole shook her hand. His palm was damp, his fingers trembling. "I hope you keep your promise." "I will," Claire assured him, "if you keep your part." She left the office and took a cab. As she rode home, tomorrow's events replayed in her mind over and over. She would have to act naturally, without giving herself away. David knew her too well. If anything about her changed, he would notice. At Elena's apartment, Claire turned on the light, got undressed, and got into bed, but she couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were spinning relentlessly. The next day she would see David. She would smile at him, talk to him, pretend nothing had happened, and inside, rage and pain would be boiling. And Sarah, her own sister, whom she loved, whom she had protected since they were children. Sarah had always been the little one, the weak one, the one who needed help. Claire had helped her with school, with work, lent her money that was never repaid, and now it had all come to this. The next day, Claire woke up late, around noon. She called Cole. "How's it going?" "David called me this morning," the lawyer replied. "He asked if the documents were ready. I told him yes. He told me to come to his house today at 7 p.m. He mentioned Sarah will be there too, that they want to review everything before they leave." "Excellent," Claire felt her heart race. "Go. Tell them everything is in order. Let them celebrate. And you? I'll get home around 8, after you. I'll say they changed my flight and I came back early. We'll see how they react." That evening, Claire was in a cab on her way home, clutching her keys. She hadn't been there for almost a week. What would have changed? Probably nothing. David wasn't one to worry about tidiness. She went up to the 7th floor, opened the door, and went inside. The entryway light was on. Voices and laughter came from the kitchen. Claire took off her jacket, hung it on the coat rack, and went to the kitchen. 3 people were at the table: David, Sarah, and Cole. In front of them were glasses of champagne. When Claire appeared in the doorway, all 3 of them froze. "Claire?" David was the first to react. "What are you doing here?" "Hello," Claire smiled, though it was difficult. "Well, I came back early." "What are you celebrating?" An uncomfortable silence fell. Sarah was the first to compose herself. "We were just meeting to discuss some things. This is Stephen, David's lawyer." "A pleasure." Claire extended her hand to Cole. He shook it, and Claire felt his fingers squeeze hers slightly. A signal. Everything was going according to plan. "Claire, you must be tired." David stood up. "Go rest. We'll be done in a minute." "No, I'm fine." Claire went to the refrigerator. "I just want to grab something to eat. Don't mind me." She took out a yogurt and stood by the window, her back to the table, as if looking out into the courtyard. In the reflection of the glass, she saw David and Sarah exchange glances. Cole was sitting with his head down. "So, Stephen, is everything ready?" David asked, lowering his voice. "Yes," Cole replied. "All the documents are prepared, signed, and registered. You can rest easy." Soon, Claire thought. Very soon you'll know what it feels like for the victim to become the hunter. Claire's morning began at 5:30. She had barely slept all night. She lay next to David, listening to his steady breathing, and thinking that in a few hours, everything would change. David slept soundly, without a care in the world. He was probably dreaming of the beaches in the Cayman Islands and a carefree life with stolen money. Claire got up silently, went to the kitchen, and made coffee. Outside, dawn was just beginning to break. The May sky was clear and promised a warm day. She picked up her phone and checked her messages. Cole had written at 5 a.m., "Everything's ready, awaiting your signal." Claire typed her reply. "We file the complaint at the U.S. Attorney's Office at 9. Meet me at the entrance at 8:45. She finished her coffee, got dressed, and left the condo without making a sound. David wouldn't get up before 9. He had always liked to sleep in. By then, everything would already be in motion. A cab dropped her off in front of the Federal Building in downtown Chicago. Cole was already waiting at the entrance, pale but determined. In his hands, he carried a thick folder of documents. "Are you sure about this?" he asked as Claire approached. "If we go in now, there's no turning back." "I've never been more sure," Claire replied firmly. "Let's go." They went up to the 3rd floor and entered the reception area of the criminal division. The assistant U.S. attorney on duty, a middle-aged man, listened to them and frowned. "This is large-scale fraud, you say?" He looked at Claire. "Tell me from the beginning." Claire began her account. She spoke calmly, without showing emotion, laying out the facts. How her husband and sister had planned to divert her company's assets and leave her with the debt, how they had forged documents using her signatures, how they planned to flee the country. The prosecutor listened and took notes. Then he turned to Cole. "And who are you in this story?" "I'm the lawyer who processed the documents," Cole said, placing the folder on the table. "They dragged me into this by deceiving me, assuring me it was legal. When I realized I was participating in a scam, I decided to help the injured party. Here are all the documents, contracts, emails, money trail diagrams, and recordings of the conversations where the plan was discussed." The prosecutor opened the folder and began to review the contents. The more he read, the more serious his face became. "This is very serious," he said at last. "If all this is confirmed, we're looking at aggravated large-scale wire fraud. They could face up to 20 years in prison." "They plan to fly out this afternoon," Claire reminded him. "The flight is at 2 p.m. "Understood." The prosecutor picked up the phone. "I need to coordinate the arrest with the FBI. Wait here." He left the office. Claire and Cole sat in silence. The minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly. Claire looked at her watch. 10:20 a.m. By now, David would have woken up and discovered she wasn't home. Maybe he would call her, ask where she was. The prosecutor returned 15 minutes later. "The arrest warrant is authorized," he said. "We're sending a team to the address right now. You will come with us to identify the suspects and point out where the evidence is located. Agreed?" Claire stood up. Half an hour later, 2 unmarked cars pulled up to the building where Claire and David lived. Claire rode the elevator with the prosecutor and 3 federal agents. Her heart was pounding, anticipating the moment of truth. She opened the door with her keys. In the entryway was David's packed suitcase. Voices came from the bedroom. "FBI. Nobody move." The agents entered the condo quickly. Claire followed them in. David was in the middle of the bedroom, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, his phone in his hand. Beside him, sitting on the bed, was Sarah. She had already arrived. Seeing Claire with the uniformed agents, she jumped up. "Claire, what's going on?" "What's going on is that justice is finally here," Claire replied calmly. The lead agent read the arrest warrant aloud. David listened, growing paler with every word. When he finished, David turned to Claire. "You? It was you?" "Yes, me." Claire looked him in the eyes. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? That I would just sit back and watch you destroy my life? But how?" "The kitchen camera?" Claire managed a cold smile. "The one I placed among the plants before I left on my trip. Remember? I asked you to water the flowers. I knew you couldn't care less about them." David stood still, understanding. Sarah put her hands to her head. "Oh my God, she heard everything." "Everything," Claire confirmed. "And I saw it, and I recorded it. Your charming conversation with the lawyer about how to ruin me. Every word. Claire, listen to me." David took a step toward her, but one of the agents stepped between them. "It's not what you think. We can explain everything." "You can explain it to the prosecutor," Claire said, turning her back on him. Suddenly, Sarah burst into tears. "Claire, but you're my sister. Are you really going to turn me in?" "I didn't want to. It was David's idea. He dragged me into it." "Shut up," David yelled at her. "Don't say anything without a lawyer." "Speaking of which, where is your lawyer?" Claire asked. "Stephen Cole, the one who prepared all the papers. Right now, he's giving a statement at the U.S. Attorney's office, telling them how you forced him to participate in the scam." David hadn't expected that twist. "Cole, he betrayed us." "He saved himself," Claire corrected. "He decided to cooperate with the authorities. He's not stupid." "That coward sold us out," David muttered under his breath. "Sir, ma'am, please come with us," the agent said, gesturing to his colleagues. They led David and Sarah away. Claire stayed in the condo to show the prosecutor where the company documents were. She opened the safe in the study, took out folders with contracts, the corporate seal, a USB drive with electronic copies of the documents. "Here is everything that might be useful," she said. "And also the camera recording where they are heard discussing the plan." "Perfect." The prosecutor collected everything as evidence. "You will need to come in later to give a formal statement." "I'll be there," Claire promised. When everyone had left, she was alone in the empty condo. She sat on the living room sofa and felt the exhausting tension of the past few days crash down on her. Her hands were shaking, her vision blurred. She covered her face with her hands and, for the first time in all this, allowed herself to cry. The tears flowed freely, uncontrollably. Claire cried from relief, from pain, from rage, from disappointment. Her life had fallen apart. Her husband turned out to be a traitor. Her sister, too. Her business was destroyed. Even if she managed to recover the money through the courts, the company was beyond saving. Its reputation was ruined. Clients were gone. She cried for a long time, maybe an hour. Then she dried her tears, washed her face, and made herself some tea. She had to pull herself together. Yes, her life had been torn down. Yes, the future looked bleak. But she wasn't going to give up. The phone rang. It was Cole. "How did it go?" he asked. "They've been arrested," Claire replied. They were taken to the federal building. "Good." She could hear the relief in his voice. "I've already given my full statement. I will continue to cooperate with the investigation." "Do that," Claire advised. "Tell them everything you know. It's your only chance." "I know." Cole was silent for a few seconds. "You know, I didn't sleep at all last night, thinking about what I'd done, how I could have agreed to something like that." "You agreed because you were scared and tempted by the money," Claire said harshly. "But then you made the right decision. That's what counts." "Thank you," he replied softly. "Thank you for giving me that chance." Claire hung up. Outside, the day continued as usual. She thought that right now David and Sarah should have been at the airport, on their way to a new life. Instead, they were sitting in a holding cell, realizing that everything had collapsed. That afternoon, Claire went back to the federal building to give her official statement. They questioned her for 3 hours, asking detailed questions about the company, the transactions, how she had discovered the plan. Claire answered clearly and coherently, providing all the evidence she had. The prosecutor studied the kitchen recording carefully. "This is very strong evidence," he said. "It clearly shows the existence of a criminal conspiracy. Along with the documents provided by Cole, we have a solid evidentiary basis." "What happens now?" Claire asked. "We'll open a case for aggravated wire fraud committed by an organized group," the prosecutor explained. "They could both face up to 20 years in prison. We'll request they be held without bail because there's a flight risk, as evidenced by the plane tickets, and a risk they might pressure witnesses." "And Cole?" "Cole will likely get probation for cooperation," he replied. "But the judge will decide that. The important thing is that he is cooperating, providing evidence, and showing remorse." Claire nodded. It was fair. Cole had helped expose the crime. Without him, it would have been much more difficult. She returned home that evening. The condo felt foreign, empty. Everything there reminded her of David, his things, his books, his photos on the walls. Claire walked through the rooms, collecting his belongings and putting them in boxes. He could get them when he got out, if he got out. She stopped in front of a photo of her and David on their wedding day. Young, happy, in love. 5 years ago. Back then, Claire believed it would be forever, that together they could overcome any challenge. And in the end, he betrayed her for money and an affair with her sister. Claire took the photo off the wall and put it in a box. The next day, the arraignment was held for David and Sarah. They both looked haggard. David, grim and full of rage. Sarah, tearful and scared. The prosecutor read the indictment and requested that both be held without bail. Their lawyers objected, arguing they had no prior records and had a fixed address, but the judge was firm. Given the gravity of the charges and the clear flight risk, as demonstrated by the purchase of tickets to leave the country, the judge said, "This court orders David Thompson and Sarah Davis to be remanded in custody." David shouted something, but his words were lost under the bang of the gavel. The court officers led them both away. Claire learned of the decision from the prosecutor and felt something strange. It wasn't triumph or joy, but a kind of emptiness. She had gotten justice. They would receive their punishment. But what now? Her life was still in pieces. She took a cab to her company's office. It was in an industrial park on the outskirts of Chicago, in a small 2-story building. Claire went up to the second floor, opened the door to her office, and sat behind her desk. She had spent the last 10 years there. She had built the business from scratch. She had invested her soul, her energy, and her money. Keystone Construction, LLC, was her creation, and now it had to be closed. Claire opened her laptop and began reviewing the financial documents. The company's debts were enormous. Even if they managed to recover the diverted assets through the courts, it would take years. But the creditors were demanding their money now. Bankruptcy was inevitable. She called her accountant, Roxana. "Roxana, we need to begin bankruptcy proceedings," Claire said. "Prepare all the documentation." "Claire, I heard what happened." Roxana's voice was filled with sincere sadness. "I'm so sorry." "Thanks," Claire managed a tired smile. "But there's nothing to be done. We have to close everything down properly." The following weeks were a blur of meetings with lawyers, creditors, and accountants. Claire initiated the bankruptcy, sold off the few remaining assets, and paid the employees. By the end of the month, Keystone Construction, LLC, ceased to exist. Claire also sold the condo she had owned before her marriage, where she had lived with David. Too many memories, too much pain. She bought a small 2-bedroom apartment in a different neighborhood and moved in with only the essentials. David and Sarah remained in pretrial detention. Cole continued to testify, helping the investigation reconstruct the money trail. Thanks to his cooperation, most of the diverted assets were located and the accounts were frozen. One night, Claire was sitting in the kitchen of her new apartment, drinking tea and looking out the window. The phone rang. It was Cole. "Good evening, Claire." His voice was hesitant. "Sorry to bother you. I just wanted to see how you are." "I'm fine," Claire replied curtly. "I closed the company. I moved. I'm starting a new life. By the way, I filed for divorce from David. The lawyer says it will be quick. With him in jail, he won't be able to contest it. I want to close that chapter as soon as possible." "I'm glad." Cole paused for a moment. "You see, the investigation is about to wrap up. Soon the case will go to the judge. They told me I'll likely get a suspended sentence for cooperating." "I'm truly glad," Claire said sincerely. "You helped. Without you, it would have been much harder." "I still feel guilty," he said in a low voice. "For agreeing in the first place, for not refusing from the very beginning. The important thing is that you corrected your mistake." Claire took a sip of her tea. "That counts for a lot." They were silent. Then Cole asked suddenly, "So what will you do now? Start another business?" Claire thought about it. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "I'll probably start something, yes, but not in construction. I'm sick of it. I want something different, something simple and honest." "I understand," Cole said. Another few seconds of silence before he added, "If you need legal help, call me, pro bono. It's the least I can do." Claire smiled. "Thanks, I might just do that." They said their goodbyes. Claire put the phone on the table and looked at the clock. It was late. Outside, the city lights glowed. Somewhere, in a detention center, were David and Sarah, coming to terms with the long sentences awaiting them. And she was here, free, alive, ready to start over. And for the first time in a long time, Claire felt something like hope. The trial took place 6 months later. Claire attended the sentencing hearing. The judge read the verdict in a monotone voice. David Thompson and Sarah Davis were found guilty of aggravated wire fraud committed by an organized group. David was sentenced to 8 years in a federal prison, Sarah to 7. In addition, both had to pay restitution for the damages caused and were barred from holding executive positions for 5 years after their release. Stephen Cole received a suspended sentence of 3 years for his cooperation. However, the disciplinary committee of the Illinois State Bar Association had decided to disbar him. His cooperation with the investigation and his active remorse were considered mitigating factors by the court, but the professional guild was stricter. The ethical breach had been too severe. Claire listened and felt neither triumph nor satisfaction, only exhaustion, and the desire for it all to be over. She saw Cole sitting, pale, with his head bowed. When the judge announced the decision about his disbarment, he flinched, but didn't look up. Claire understood that for him, it was a devastating blow to lose the profession to which he had dedicated 10 years of his life. When the judge delivered the last line of the sentence and retreated to her chambers, Claire stood up and left the courtroom without looking back. Outside, it was a cold November day. The wind whipped the bare branches of the trees. Claire wrapped her coat tighter and walked slowly toward the L train. The phone rang an hour later, when she was already home. It was Cole. "Good afternoon, Claire." His voice was tired. "Sorry to bother you right after the hearing. I just wanted to see how you are." "I'm fine," Claire replied briefly. "And you? I imagine it's not easy." 3 years without being able to practice law, Cole let out a bitter laugh. "I knew it could happen, but I still had a small hope. Oh well, it's fair. I broke professional ethics by accepting that plan. What will you do now?" "Look for a job," he sighed. "No one can take my law degree away. I'll work as in-house counsel for some company. Not as an attorney, but it's something." Claire wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. She felt Cole deserved the punishment, but at the same time, she felt sorry for him. He had helped her, risked his career, testified against David and Sarah, and now he was paying for a mistake made out of fear and weakness. "If you need anything, call," Claire said. "I can help with recommendations if needed." "Thank you," he replied sincerely. "That means a lot to me." They said goodbye. Claire put the phone aside and sat for a long time on the sofa, looking out the window. In the 6 months since David and Sarah's arrest, her life had completely changed. She had closed the construction company, sold the condo where she had lived with her husband, and moved into a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts. The money from the sale and some of the recovered assets allowed her to live without financial worries. But the idea of starting a new business from scratch scared her. In recent months, Claire had thought a lot about the future. Construction no longer appealed to her. It was too tied to pain. She remembered that in college, she had dreamed of being an interior designer, but had chosen a more practical specialty. Maybe now was the time to return to that dream. She opened her laptop and began to analyze the market for design services in Chicago. The demand was high, the competition too, but there was a niche for a small studio with a personalized approach. She made a business plan, calculated the expenses, and found a space for rent. By the end of the month, the decision was made. She would open an interior design studio. 2 months later, Dreamspace Interiors opened its doors to its first clients. Claire hired a young designer named Paulina and a project manager, Cyril. The office was small, 2 rooms in a business center near downtown, but cozy and tastefully decorated. The first jobs came through acquaintances and later through the internet. The business grew slowly but steadily. The work gave Claire a pleasure she had never felt in construction. Each project was a creative act, an opportunity to create something beautiful and unique. She met with clients, listened to their dreams for their homes, drew sketches, chose materials, and saw the happiness in people's eyes when they received the interior they had dreamed of. Cole called from time to time to tell her how he was doing. A month after the trial, he got a job as in-house counsel at a small construction company. The salary was modest, the tasks routine, reviewing contracts, advising on zoning issues, overseeing transactions, but he was grateful even for that. "You know, sometimes I think it's for the best," he told Claire during one of their phone conversations, starting from the bottom again. "Seeing how normal people work, not just successful lawyers in expensive suits, it's a good school." "I agree," Claire said. "After that, you appreciate what you have more." Spring arrived almost without them noticing. In March, Claire received a major commission to design the interior of a restaurant. The project was complex, with many nuances of layout and installations. Claire called Cole to ask for advice on the clauses of the contract with the contractors. "Of course, I'll help you," he agreed immediately. "Can I come by your office and review the documents?" He arrived in the evening, after Paulina and Cyril had left. Claire made tea and spread the contracts on the table. Cole examined them carefully, line by line, making notes, pointing out problematic points. "You need to add a penalty clause here for delays in the delivery schedule," he said, pointing to the text. "And here, It's better to clarify that the responsibility for the quality of the materials lies with the contractor. Claire listened and took notes. Cole worked with focus and professionalism. Suddenly, she realized that in these months, he had changed. He seemed calmer, more confident. The constant nervousness she had seen in him in their first meetings was gone. "Thank you so much," Claire said when they finished. "You've helped me immensely. What do I owe you?" "Nothing." He shook his head. "I told you, it's the least I can do. After everything, Stephen." "It's been 6 months," Claire said gently. "You've more than paid your dues. Stop punishing yourself." He looked at her, and there was something warm, grateful in his eyes. "Maybe, but I like helping you, not out of obligation, but because I want to." They sat in silence, drinking their now lukewarm tea. Outside, the spring dusk was falling, and the city was lighting up. "And work? How is it?" Claire asked. "Good," Cole shrugged. "The boss is reasonable, the team is nice. It's not as interesting as practicing law, but it's still law. I review contracts with suppliers, advise on taxes, oversee real estate purchases. I've gotten used to it. And in 3 years, you'll go back to practicing." "I don't know," he said thoughtfully. "Maybe. Or maybe I'll stay as in-house counsel, or start my own small firm to advise on civil matters. We'll see. The important thing is that now I have time to think and decide what I really want." Claire nodded. She understood that feeling perfectly. After the collapse of an old life comes the opportunity to build a new one, more conscious, more honest. "And you?" he asked. "Are you happy you chose design?" "Very," Claire smiled. "It's a completely different feeling. I create something beautiful. I make others happier. And every day I go to work with joy, not with that weight in my chest I used to feel." "I'm happy for you," Cole said sincerely. "You deserve to be happy." They talked for a while longer until he got ready to leave. At the door, he stopped. "Claire, can I stop by from time to time? Not just for work. Just to talk, have some tea. I miss the company. The people at the construction firm are good, but they're not my people. You know what I mean? With you, it's easy." Claire looked at him and realized she missed his company too. In those months, Cole had become someone she could trust. They had gone through a difficult ordeal together, and it had created a bond between them that was hard to explain in words. "Of course, come by whenever you want," she replied. "I'd love to see you." From that evening on, Cole began to stop by the studio once a week, sometimes more. They drank tea and talked about work, life, their plans. Sometimes he helped her with legal matters. Other times, he just sat nearby while Claire worked on sketches. Gradually, their relationship moved beyond the office. They started seeing each other on weekends, walking in the parks along Lake Michigan, going to movies, to cafes. Cole turned out to be an interesting conversationalist, well-read, with a subtle sense of humor. Claire found herself looking forward to their meetings with impatience. One day, at the beginning of summer, they were sitting on the lakefront, watching the water and eating ice cream. It was a warm, sunny day. Around them, people were strolling, children were laughing. "You know," Cole said, "I often think about how strange everything has been. If it weren't for that whole fraud story, we would never have met. I would still be that lawyer chasing money without thinking about the consequences." "Sometimes life has to hit us hard to wake us up," Claire said thoughtfully. "It hurts, it's scary, but it's necessary. Otherwise, we just keep sleeping, not realizing we're going in the wrong direction." "I agree." Cole turned to her. "Claire, I wanted to tell you something. I really like spending time with you. You've become an important person in my life. Maybe the most important." Claire looked at him and realized she felt the same. In these months, Cole had ceased to be a mere acquaintance or a friend. He was someone she trusted, with whom she felt calm and at peace. With him, she could be herself, without masks or defensive walls. "I like being with you too," she said softly. Cole took her hand. They sat like that, holding hands, looking at the water, and it felt like the beginning of something new, bright, and right. A few more months passed. The design studio was growing. New clients and interesting projects were coming in. Claire hired another designer and expanded the office. Cole continued to work as in-house counsel at the construction company but was already thinking about opening his own firm in a couple of years. They moved in together in the fall. Claire moved into Stephen's place and rented out her apartment. His apartment was cozy, and Claire quickly transformed it, turning the bachelor pad into a real home. One night, they were sitting in the kitchen, drinking wine and chatting. Suddenly, Claire remembered the camera, the one she had placed in the kitchen of her old condo, the one that had changed everything. "Stephen, do you remember the camera that started it all?" "Of course," he nodded. "How could I forget? I saved it." Claire got up, went to the bedroom, and came back with a small box. "Here it is. For a long time I didn't know what to do with it. I felt bad throwing it away. After all, it saved my life. But looking at it was also strange." Cole took the camera, looked at it for a moment. "You know what I think?" he said. "This camera taught us something important. Real trust doesn't need surveillance. When there's honesty between people, cameras become obsolete." "I agree." Claire took the camera back and placed it inside the box. "That's why I'll never install something like this again. Some things are better seen not through a lens, but with your own eyes, and felt with your heart, not through suspicion." She closed the box and put it on the highest shelf in the closet. Let it stay there as a reminder of the past, of what they had both been through, the pain, the betrayal, the fear, but also of how even from the darkest story, something good can emerge. Stephen wrapped his arms around her, and they stood by the window looking out at the city. Somewhere, behind bars, David and Sarah were serving their sentences. Claire felt no hatred, only a faint sadness. They had chosen the path of deceit and betrayal and were now paying for it. She, on the other hand, had chosen honesty and had been rewarded with a new life, a new purpose, and a person by her side whom she could trust. "You know what I'm thinking?" Claire said softly. "What?" "That sometimes you have to lose everything to find what really matters. I lost my husband, my sister, my company, but I found myself, and I found you. And you," Stephen kissed her on the cheek. "Thank you for giving me a chance to change, for believing in me when I no longer believed in myself." They stood there, holding each other, as the city slowly sank into the autumn night. And on the closet shelf, inside a box, rested the small camera, a witness to a past that was definitively left behind. Ahead lay a new life, built on trust, honesty, and genuine feelings, and that was the best reward for everything they had been through.